Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have episode 23 of Horror Stories with no mid-roll ads. I hope you all enjoy it. Really quick, in case you're wondering why this intro is on camera, I'm going to try to get through this really quickly. Quite a few channels have been getting demonetized lately. I think what's going on, I don't know this for fact, so don't quote me. I think YouTube is trying to get rid of all of the AI narration channels out there. There's so many of them that have popped up over the past couple years, and unfortunately quite a few channels that have like actual people narrating the stories and writing the stories are being falsely hit. My channel's currently unaffected. I haven't gotten any emails. The channel is still monetized as of right now, but this is my way of dotting my I's and crossing my T's so that if my channel ever comes under review, they can see that I'm a real person and hopefully I keep my monetization. You all know what we've been doing on this channel for a while now. There's one ad when you click on the video, one after the intro, and then there are no more ads until the video is completely finished. That way, you have 2 hours of horror stories, uninterrupted. You can just relax. You don't have to click through any ads, nothing like that. And I really don't want to lose what little income I currently have off this channel. So my way of hopefully combating that is just from here on out, I'm going to record these intros on camera. I will not be recording the stories on camera. I don't think it's necessary, and I also just really don't want to. I didn't get into this to be famous or to be a personality. I just really like sitting in the corner of my bedroom at night, turning on the microphone and telling horror stories. That's all I want this channel to ever be. So hopefully this is my way of continuing to be able to do that. Just making sure, you know, that way if my channel ever comes under review, they can see I'm a real person, and hopefully, you know, no issues arise. So that's that. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax. We have some really awesome stories tonight. Enjoy them right after the ad break after this intro. There won't be any more ad breaks after that one. And hopefully in future videos there will be an ad break after the intro, because you know, I want to at least earn a little bit. I do spend a lot of time on these videos, so yeah, probably an over explanation. Narrator, by the way, been doing this like 10 years, can't even get through a sentence, but yeah, I hope you all enjoy. Sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. I used to work nights at the 24-hour shell on the edge of Elmwood. Flickering sodium lights, the diesel stench that never quite left your clothes. The clock above the register, stuck 3 minutes behind. Like even time was too tired to move. A typical shift was nothing. Count the same pack of Marlboros for the third time at 4 a.m. Listen to the coffee machine gurgle like it was dying. Watch moths spiral into the bug zapper outside until the pop 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 sounded like distant gunfire. Sometimes a regular drunk, old Ray would stumble in, buy a tall boy and a single scratch off he never won. He'd scratch it with his thumbnail, mutter next time, and shuffle back into the dark. Routine. Safe. Boring enough to make you forget how empty the streets sounded at 3 a.m. The scratch-off machine sat in the corner like it had always been there. Bulky, beige, older than me. Customers started calling it Lucky after the first few big hits. Mr. Harlem came in every Tuesday like clockwork. Always the same. Marlboros, 1 ticket, scratched slow and deliberate with a nickel he kept in his pocket. Purposely stored. He'd hum tunelessly while he worked the foil, like he was coaxing the win out. One night he hit $50, tipped me a 10, said, "See, patience wins." Next week, $100. He started scratching slower each time, eyes fixed like he was afraid to miss a silver flake. Harlan stopped coming by after he won a few more times. Odd for a routine-driven guy like him. Sheriff Rowland stopped by now and then. Always for a blue raspberry slushy mid-shift. "This stuff never gets old," he said with a blue smile. I asked him about Mr. Harlan, given that this was the second Tuesday he didn't show. Mind if I ask you something, Sheriff? He set the slushie on the counter, adjusted his glasses. Long as it's not about parking tickets. Harlan used to come in every Tuesday, always the same time. I haven't seen him since he won a bunch of scratch-off tickets. This is the third week in a row. Roland watched the machine while I talked. Didn't look at me once. The trailer was empty when his employer reported him missing, he finally said. The lights in the house were all burning, and the fridge door open. That's weird. Anything out of the ordinary? I asked. His jaw tightened, just a little. Winning tickets on the dining room table, he said, like somebody left in a hurry. I pointed toward the corner where the machine rested. They came from that machine. He took a long pull from the straw, eyes still on the screen with his spectacles reflecting the light it emitted. People who catch a break don't always leave a forwarding address, he said. Some folks take the chance to disappear. He picked up the slushie and headed for the door. You worry too much, he added. This town does that to people. I watched him go. But the problem was, Mr. Harlan wasn't the only one who'd caught a break, and he wasn't the only one who'd stopped coming back. Tammy from the diner across the street used to come in after her graveyard shift, still in her uniform, smelling of grease and cheap cigarettes. She'd buy a ticket, scratch it fast like it owed her money, laugh when she lost. After her $200 win, she started showing up later and later, alone, eyes glassy. This machine knows me, she told me once, voice low. Quit her job the next day. No one saw her after that. Another case was Jake, the mechanic, loud enough that you always heard him before you saw him. A loud guy, always mentioned about how he just needed one more win to finally fix the shop for good. One night he hit $500, the biggest payout I ever saw from that machine. A week later, Jake was dead. His truck went straight off the ravine on Dew Pass. The news spread through town like the flu. People whispered about it. No skid marks. No swerve. Just tire tracks. Arrow straight. Disappearing over the edge. Most folks settled on the obvious explanation. That he was drunk, blacked out. Another senseless accident. But anyone who knew Jake knew better. He loved two things more than anything else. His truck and his work. Mr. Jones loved it. Sales tripled. He hung a little handwritten sign above the machine. Our lucky scratchers. With a winking emoji sticker. When I mentioned how many winners had vanished, he smiled that small, polite smile and said, People win. They move on. Life changes. You should play too, Night Boy. Maybe your luck is waiting. He said it the same way someone offers you a mint after they've already slipped something in your drink. I thought about it longer than I should have. Tried to line things up. Still came up with loose ends. 3 people. Same routine. Same machine. All of it breaking the same way after they won. I told myself there were explanations. People change. People make bad decisions when money shows up. That's what everyone says. But Jake loved that truck. Loved it enough that he wouldn't even drink if he planned on driving it home. He lived 2 blocks from his shop, close enough to walk, so why did he drive up the mountain? I knew that there was only one way to find out what the hell was going on. I started testing tickets on slow shifts. First time I hesitated. Stood there staring at the dispenser like it might bite. Just one, I told myself. See if it's really lucky. Use the same quarter every time. Same spot at the counter. Same slow scratch. The wind felt like a tiny electric kiss. Sharp, a rush. Followed immediately by cold nausea crawling up my throat. It was the same feeling you get when you deliberately do something you're not supposed to. After the rush, it felt like the foil was scraping something inside my skull. My hands started shaking the way Tammy's hands shook. Convinced myself it was the energy drink. One slow night I tried to warn a guy, middle-aged, quiet, buying a stack for his wife's birthday. "Hey man," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Maybe skip these tonight. Weird stuff's been happening with winners." He laughed. "You trying to scare off business?" Mr. Jones appeared from the back, calm as ever. "He's joking. Play if you want. Luck's luck." The guy bought them anyway. Never saw him or his family again. The machine started acting in a way that it wanted to be observed. Screen lagging on animations, like it was thinking. Dispenser clicking when no one was near it. Soft, expectant. Every time when I turned my back to stock shelves, my skin prickled like someone was staring, as if a shadow was lurking behind me, a felt presence from a specific direction. My spatial awareness sharpened to a painful clarity. The bug zapper outside fell into sync with my breathing. Pop on the inhale, pop on the exhale. Each crack of electricity landed somewhere deep in my chest. Every sound and smell arriving amplified, distorted, wrong. I could feel each electrical impulse firing through my synapses, as if my nerves were no longer my own but part of the current itself. One night, the power dipped. Everything died except the machine. Its screen stayed bright, cycling slower. I leaned close. For half a second, the text changed. "I win." Then back to normal. I would never forget the time a kid, maybe 19, came in around 3 a.m. He bought 10 tickets with crumpled 20s, scratched them one after another at the counter. The sound was intimate, slow scrape, scrape, scrape of coin on foil, each layer peeling back with a faint metallic sigh. The smell of fresh scratch-off film filled the air, powdery, chemical, distinctive. He won every single one, laughed so hard he started coughing, bought more tickets, then continued scratching, like he couldn't stop. His fingers sped up, then slowed again, careful, deliberate. I knew something was wrong before his eyes went empty. He was smiling. He never stopped smiling. By the time I followed him outside, he was sitting in his Civic with the engine running, just staring down at the tickets spread across his lap. The smile was still there, pulled wider than it should have been, like his face had forgotten how to relax, or how to look normal. I watched the clock over the register roll forward and back again. He didn't move for almost an hour. I tapped the window. Nothing. His mouth moved, stretching soundlessly, working at words that never came, mucus pouring out of his mouth, dilated pupils which can only be associated with the effect some kind of extreme drug. I called for an ambulance. They didn't arrive for 3 hours. By then his hands were locked around the tickets, fingers curled like tight claws. The paramedics had to peel them loose one by one. After the incident, I couldn't sleep without dreaming about his face. Not screaming, not in pain, just that euphoric, vacant expression. I kept thinking about it afterwards. He was fine before he bought the tickets. I broke in on my night off. I still had the spare key from closing. The store was pitch black except for the machine's haze. Its glow pulsed softly, slow and inconsistent, like it was breathing. I stood there longer than I meant to, weighing consequences I already knew I would ignore. I was drawn to it, to the light, to the smell of freshly printed hard paper, to the shimmer of silver foil, and the dry whisper it made when peeled away. My mouth watered. The hair along my arms and neck stood on end. Tears pooled in my eye sockets as the urge to scratch and win swelled until it filled every inch of me. I acknowledged it, communicated with it without words. I wanted to obey it. Then a moment slipped past. What felt like a trance, a waking daydream where my body simply took over. My arm reached out on its own, fingers closing in on the print button. I tore myself away and yanked the plug from the wall, heart hammering. The cord came free cleanly. The screen stayed lit. "The hell?" I whispered. I grabbed the broom from the storeroom and struck the screen. It answered with a dull, hollow thump. Something sounded back. A voice. Very close. Very patient. What came out of the machine could only be described as a distorted grunt. It spoke my name. First, middle, last. Slowly. Like it was reading from an old report card. Then it said my mother's name. The way she used to when I was little and in trouble. Soft, disappointed. The air thickened with the smell of it. Powdery, metallic scratch-off foil. Undercut by something wetter. Like coins left too long in a corpse's pocket. I froze. I clamped my hands over my ears, desperate to shut out the lie. It didn't sound like her, but I recognized it. Her. It. The noise swelled anyway, forcing its way through the gaps between my fingers. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for something terrible. Light burned through my eyelids, searing white. I gave in to the weight of my body and folded forward, burying my head between my knees. This was it. Then it stopped. The light, the sound. I opened my eyes slowly. The store was full of cops. Mr. Jones told the cops I'd had an episode. He showed them the footage, me standing alone in the dark, perfectly still, eyes fixed on something that wasn't there, whispering for 20 minutes straight. I didn't remember any of it. Not the words, not the time missing. Nothing. The cops gave me a warning and left it at that. No charges, no paperwork, just looks. Mr. Jones stood beside them the whole time, calm, smiling softly. When they turned to go, he gave me a little wink, like we shared something. I told myself I was grateful. Word spread fast. It always does in towns like this. Night Boy lost it. People started asking if I was okay. The way you ask someone with a rash if it's contagious. Mr. Jones stayed too calm. Customers complained about the missing machine. He told them it was under repair. It never came back. A few days later, I drove past the Shell at 2 a.m. Again, lights off except the corner window. A faint glow leaked out. The kind that doesn't come from fluorescent tubes. The silhouette inside was wrong. Too still, too patient. A new machine, maybe. Or the same one. Just rolled to the next stop on the line. Someone stood at the counter, scratching, slow, methodical. The coin moved in tiny, deliberate circles, like they had all the time in the world. Behind them, the shadow was taller now. Not moving, just taller. I was drawn by it. I accelerated, didn't look back. But every gas station I pass, my fingers twitch for foil. Every time I blink, I see hands, dozens, hundreds, peeling silver in perfect unison. Faces stretched wide, grinning the way winners grin when the numbers finally line up. Mouths open too far, eyes too bright. They're still winning, still scratching, still whispering the names back to each other like a prayer they can't stop saying. The glow moves, follows me. Late at night, I catch myself murmuring their names. Not mine, theirs. Curious of what I escaped. And why they failed. If you drive past one of those machines someday, you'll feel the pull. Just one ticket. Just to see. And when your fingers close around the foil, when the first silver flake curls away, you'll hear it. Your name. You won't win it. It will win you. Jack's Falls isn't the kind of town that gets written about in travel magazines. Population hovering around 3,000. One main street with a hardware store and a diner that closes at 6. And a coastline so rocky and unwelcoming that even the seagulls seem pissed off about it. The town's claim to fame is its name, which comes from Captain Jack Morgan, a pirate who supposedly fled British naval ships in 1699 and vanished somewhere along our stretch of coast. Local legend says he and his crew made it to shore with their plunder but were never seen again. Most people assume they got away in a rowboat or died in the surf. I assumed that too, until 3 months ago. Mark had been obsessed with the Captain Jack stories since we were kids. He'd grown up on tales his grandfather told him about hidden treasure and secret caves. The kind of thing that sounds awesome when you're 10 and pathetic when you're 27. But Mark never let it go. He'd spent years researching old naval records, studying tide patterns, hiking every inch of coastline looking for cave entrances that matched historical descriptions. His girlfriend Sarah enabled him, mostly because she found his enthusiasm charming, and because she liked hiking. Me? I just went along because Mark was my best friend, and I didn't have much else going on. When Mark called me that October morning, I could hear the tremor in his voice before he even said hello. "I found it, John. I actually found it." He'd been exploring a section of cliff face about 2 miles north of town, somewhere we'd passed dozens of times without noticing anything unusual. But the recent storm had caused a minor rock slide, and Mark had spotted something that made him scramble down to investigate. A small opening, partially concealed by centuries of erosion and debris, but unmistakably man-made around the edges. He'd taken photos, measurements, and coordinates. He wanted to go back with proper equipment. "It's this weekend or never," he said. "Tide patterns won't be this favorable again until next year, and you know the county's been talking about putting up fencing along the whole stretch. This is it, John. This is actually it." I should have said no. I had a dozen good reasons. My knees weren't what they used to be. I had work on Monday. Cave diving, or spelunking, or whatever the hell you wanted to call crawling around in tight, dark spaces, had never been my idea of fun. But Mark had that tone in his voice, the one that meant he was going with or without me. Unfortunately, I'd known him since we were 10. I couldn't let my best friend do something that stupid alone. Sarah picked me up Saturday morning in Mark's truck, the bed already loaded with gear. Helmets with mounted lights, ropes, carabiners, a first aid kit that looked military grade, energy bars, water bottles, and what looked like a small sledgehammer, in case we need to widen anything. Sarah explained when she caught me staring. She was tall, athletic. From what Mark told me, she ran marathons for fun and had opinions about specific hydration packs. She worked as a physical therapist, and approached Mark's treasure hunting with the same practical enthusiasm she brought to helping people recover from knee surgery. Mark's already down there doing a preliminary scout. He's been up since 4. The drive took 20 minutes. The last 5 on a dirt road that barely qualified as a path. We parked where the trees gave way to scrub grass and jagged rocks. The ocean visible as a gray-blue line in the distance. The wind coming off the water was cold enough to sting. Mark was waiting by the cliff edge, practically vibrating with excitement. He'd rigged a rope system to make the descent easier, and he walked us through it twice before we started down. The climb down wasn't terrible, maybe 30 feet of careful scrambling, but it was enough to get my heart rate up. The cave entrance was exactly as unimpressive as I'd feared. A crack in the rock face, maybe 3 feet high and 2 feet wide. Mark had cleared away some of the smaller debris, but it still looked like the Earth's butthole. "You're sure about this?" I asked. "The historical records are clear," Mark said, pulling out his phone to show me a photo of a yellow document. British naval logs from HMS Dartmouth, dated November 1699. They chased Morgan's crew to this exact stretch of coast. The pirates made it to shore but never came back out. The naval captain assumed they had a ship waiting on the other side of the peninsula, but there's no record of Morgan or his crew ever surfacing again. 18 men, John. 18 men, and a cargo hold worth of Spanish silver just vanished. Maybe they drowned, I said. Then where are the bodies? Mark's eyes had that gleam I recognized, the one that meant he'd already made up his mind, and was just going through the motions of conversation. The cave goes somewhere. I can feel the air moving. There's space in there. Sarah was already putting on her helmet, checking her light. We stick together. We stay in radio contact, and if anything feels wrong, we turn back. Deal? I wanted to say no. I wanted to suggest we call someone official, get proper permits, and do this the right way, but I could see the desperation in Mark's face, the way his hands kept clenching and unclenching. This was his white whale. His one shot at proving all those years of research weren't wasted. Sarah was already checking her gear. Her opening was right there, and I was already putting on my helmet. We went in single file, Mark first with the biggest light, then Sarah, then me bringing up the rear. Now, I'm not a big guy, but the entrance was still a tight squeeze. I had to turn my shoulders and exhale to fit through. Rock scraped against my back and chest simultaneously. For about 10 feet, it felt like I was being swallowed. The walls pressed in from all sides, and then suddenly, it opened up. The first chamber was about the size of a large bedroom, the ceiling high enough to stand in most places. Our lights cut through the darkness, revealing stone walls and a floor that sloped gently downward. The air was cool, but not cold, with a faint smell I couldn't quite place. Mineral, maybe. Salt. Yet there was something organic underneath it all. See? Mark's voice echoed slightly. This is definitely man-made. Look at the walls. He was right. In places you could see tool marks, spots where someone had deliberately widened the passage or smoothed away irregularities. It wasn't obvious. Not unless you were looking for it, but once Mark pointed it out, I couldn't unsee it. We moved deeper. The cave branched twice, but Mark seemed confident about which way to go, consulting a hand-drawn map he'd made based on his research. He'd overlaid British naval charts with geological surveys and local folklore, creating a composite that supposedly showed the most likely route the pirates would have taken. I didn't understand half of it, but Sarah seemed convinced enough to keep following. The temperature stayed consistent, that cool but not cold feeling, and the faint smell grew stronger, not quite mineral anymore. Something else. Copper, pennies, maybe. Old metal. I caught myself breathing through my mouth to avoid it, which was stupid because then I could taste it instead. About 40 minutes in, we stopped to drink water and check our bearings. Mark's excitement was palpable, but I noticed Sarah was quieter than usual. When I asked if she was okay, she just nodded and said the smell was getting to her too. We agreed to give it another hour before turning back, regardless of what we found. The passage narrowed and widened in irregular patterns, sometimes forcing us to crouch, other times opening into spaces where our lights couldn't quite reach the ceiling. In one large chamber, we found the remains of old torches, just charred bits of wood that crumbled when Mark tried to pick one up. Evidence someone had been here before, which made sense given the pirate story, but also made the place feel more oppressive somehow. It was as if we were following in the footsteps of doomed men. There, Sarah said suddenly, pointing her light at the wall. Scratched into the stone, barely visible were marks. Not random scratches, but deliberate cuts. Symbols that might have been letters worn smooth by time. Mark ran his fingers over them, his breath coming faster. He pulled out his phone and took several photos from different angles. "This is it," he whispered. "This is actually it. This is 17th century script. I'm sure of it. Look at the way the R's are formed, and the long S. That looks like an F. This is period accurate. He was nearly trembling as he traced the letters, his academic background in colonial history finally paying off in the most literal way possible. The passage narrowed again, forcing us to crouch and then crawl. My knees immediately regretted every decision that had led me here. The walls felt closer now, and I became acutely aware of the tons of rock above us, the ocean somewhere beyond that, the very real possibility of getting stuck or lost or worse. After maybe 20 minutes of crawling, my hands were scraped raw, even through my gloves, and my knees felt like they'd been beaten with a hammer. The passage opened into another chamber, this one larger than the first, maybe 15 feet across and 10 feet high. Our lights played across the walls, revealing more tool marks and what looked like old scorch marks from torches. Then Mark swept his light around and froze. Holy. The skeleton was slumped against the far wall, still wearing the rotted remains of what might have been a coat. The fabric had long since degraded to brown tatters, but you could still make out what might have been brass buttons scattered on the ground nearby. The skull had tipped forward, jaw hanging open in a silent scream, and one arm was extended as if reaching for something. Around the bones were scraps of leather, a rusted knife that had corroded almost completely away, and what looked like the remains of a small barrel. The wooden staves collapsed inward. Sarah yelped like she'd been punched. Mark just stood there staring, his light steady on the corpse. Is this real? Sarah asked. It's real. Mark's voice was barely above a whisper. He moved closer, careful not to disturb anything, playing his light over the remains. Look at the clothing, the style of the coat, the buttons. This is late 17th century. I'd bet my life on it. This is one of them, one of Morgan's crew. But what made us all stop and really stare was the wall behind the skeleton. Someone had carved words into the stone. Not just a few marks, but entire paragraphs. The letters crude but deliberate, clearly done with something small and sharp. Probably that knife. Over what must have been days or weeks. The text started high up on the wall and descended into ragged columns, getting harder to read as it went down. Mark moved closer, playing his light over the text, and began to read aloud. His voice shook slightly. November 15th, 1699. We are 12 now. The cave goes deeper than we thought. Captain says there's a way through to the other side of the peninsula. But Davies and Mockton went looking 2 days past and haven't returned. We hear them sometimes, calling from below, but we search and find nothing. The handwriting was rough, the spelling inconsistent in the way of men who'd learned their letters late in life. But the message was clear. Mark moved his light down, finding more text carved in shaking lines. November 18th. The food is running low. Captain has ordered rationing. We dare not to go back the way we came. The Navy dogs are surely waiting at the entrance. James swears he heard Davies calling from somewhere below, but we search and find nothing. The air tastes wrong down here. Thomas says it's the damp, but I know better. Something's not right. Jesus, Sarah breathed. She moved closer to me, and I realized she was shaking. More text, the letters growing more cramped and erratic as they descended the wall, like the writer had been running out of space or time or sanity. November 22nd. 5 more are gone. They went deeper, seeking another way out, seeking fresh air, seeking anything but this tomb. The captain is changing. He speaks of voices in the dark. William says the treasure is cursed and we should leave it, abandon it in the deepest hole we can find, but the captain will not hear of it. He guards it like a dragon guards gold in the old stories of Mother used to tell. The walls feel warm to the touch now, which makes no sense in this deep. We are far below the sun's reach. The water that drips from above is thick and sticky, not clean like it should be. It leaves stains on our clothes. Jacob drank some yesterday despite warnings and has been sick ever since. He cannot stop crapping himself. The smell is awful. I reached out and touched the wall where the writer had mentioned warmth. The corpse was right. It was warm. Not hot, but distinctly warmer than it should be this far underground. At least 10 degrees warmer than the air around it. I pulled my hand back and found my fingertips slightly damp with that same sticky residue. "Keep reading," I said. Mark continued, his light moving to text that was barely legible now. The letters scratched so hard and fast, they'd gouged the stone in places, leaving deep furrows that our lights cast shadows in. November 27th. 3 of us remain. Jacob died yesterday. We buried him in the tunnel, but this morning he was gone, as if the cave swallowed him whole. The captain has taken the treasure and Thomas deeper into the cave. He says the voices told him where to go. He is mad. We are all mad. The cave breathes, I swear it. At night I hear it. A great bellowing sound like a whale. The walls pulse. Yesterday I saw John Carver embedded in the rock up to his waist. Still alive but unable to move, his eyes following me as I passed. He was begging me for help, but I did not know what to do. I tried to dig him out, but the rock was soft like clay, and it only made him sink deeper. When I returned hours later, he was gone, only a stain remaining like someone had spilled wine. The thing in the caves, it hungers. It feeds slowly. It savors. "Okay," I said. "Okay, we should go back." "Are you kidding?" Mark's eyes were wild in the light of his headlamp. "This is it, John. This is the actual historical record of what happened to them, and the treasure. He says the captain took it deeper. It's still down here." "Mark, this is clearly a man losing his mind," Sarah said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "Walls that breathe? People embedded in rock?" "He was starving and dehydrated." "Then explain this." Mark pointed to a spot on the wall where the text ended. There, carved with what must have been the last of the writer's strength, were final words. "It took them all. It will not let us leave." Below that, a date, December 3rd, 1699. And below that, scratched so deep the stone had cracked, "It beats." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of our breathing and a faint dripping somewhere in the darkness beyond our lights. "There's another passage," Mark said, pointing to a gap in the far wall. "If the captain went deeper, that's where he'd have gone. The treasure is down there." "Mark, no," I said. "This is insane. We should document this, come back with professionals. By the time we do that, the county will have sealed the cave. You know they will. This is our chance." He was already moving toward the gap, Sarah following after a moment's hesitation. I looked at the skeleton one more time, at those empty eye sockets and that reaching hand, and then I followed my friends deeper into the earth. The passage was tighter than anything we'd encountered so far, a squeeze that required moving our packs and pushing them ahead of us while we crawled on our bellies. The rock pressed in from all sides, and for one horrible moment, I was certain I'd gotten stuck. My chest too large for the gap, my hips wedged between unyielding stone. Then something gave way, and I popped through into a larger space where Mark and Sarah were waiting. "You okay?" Sarah asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. My hands were shaking. This chamber was different from the others. The walls had a strange texture, less like rock and more like something else. Coral, maybe. Or cartilage. And the smell was stronger here. That copper penny scent mixed with something organic and faintly rotten. Mark ran his hand along the wall and frowned. This doesn't feel like limestone. What does it feel like? Sarah asked. I don't know. It's softer and warm. Really warm. I touched the wall myself and immediately regretted it. He was right. It was warm, almost body temperature, and the surface had a slightly yielding quality, like pressing on firm rubber. When I pulled my hand away, my fingertips came back damp with something that wasn't quite water. It was thicker, slightly viscous. When I rubbed my fingers together, it felt like alkaline, like the slick you get from dissolving soap. We should turn back, I said again. Look. Mark's light had found something embedded in the wall. A coin. A gold coin. Its surface tarnished green but unmistakable. Spanish doubloon. Has to be. Sarah, take a photo. She did. Her camera flashed momentarily, blinding us all. Mark pulled out a small pry bar from his pack and began working at the coin. Mark, don't. The coin came free with a wet, sucking sound. Mark held it up triumphantly, turning it in the light. Then Sarah made a sound, and we both looked to where she was pointing. The wall where the coin had been was bleeding. I wish it was stained water or some mineral seepage. But it was blood. Thick, dark blood that welled up from the hole and began to run down the wall in slow rivulets. What the... Mark whispered. The wall around the wound began to pulse, slowly at first, then faster. A rhythmic motion that spread outward in ripples, and somewhere in the distance, deep in the cave, we heard it. A sound like thunder, like drums, like a heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. Okay, Sarah said, her voice tight. Okay, maybe we should... The wall bled faster, the blood now flowing freely, and more of those pulsing ripples spread outward. In my peripheral vision, I saw movement, other areas of the wall beginning to shift and flex. We need to go, Sarah said. Now. But Mark was already moving forward, his light catching something in the passage ahead. Wait, do you see that? More coins. Dozens of them, embedded in the walls and floor like metal studs and leather, and beyond them, a larger space. A chamber. Against every instinct I had, we moved forward. The walls here were unmistakably organic. The texture was wrong. The color was wrong. It had shifted from gray stone to something redder, mottled with darker patches that looked disturbingly like bruises. The floor was wet, covered in a thin film of that same viscous fluid, and our boots made soft squelching sounds with each step. The heartbeat sound was louder now, no longer distant. It echoed from all directions, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. Thump, 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 thump. The chamber opened before us, and Mark's light found the treasure. It wasn't the pile of gold I think we'd all imagined. Instead, the coins and silver pieces were embedded in the walls and floor. Hundreds, maybe, all partially absorbed into the red organic tissue that made up the chamber. Some were still visible as distinct objects. Others were half dissolved, their edges blurred and melted into the flesh. And in the center of it all, surrounded by the treasure, were the bodies. They should have been skeletons after 300 years, but they weren't. They were corpses, preserved in various states of decay. Their clothing rotted to rags, but their flesh still clinging to their bones. Some were embedded in the floor, sunken halfway into the tissue, as if the cave had been slowly digesting them. Others stood upright, held in place by growths of that red tissue that wrapped around their limbs, and torsos like vines. One wore what might have once been a captain's coat. His jaw hung open, and in the empty socket of his mouth Something glistened wetly. "This isn't real," Sarah said, but her voice carried no conviction. "This can't be real." The heartbeat was so loud now, it made my ribs vibrate. Thump, 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 thump. And as I watched, one of the corpses moved. It was subtle at first, just a twitch of the fingers, a slight turn of the head. Then the jaw began to work, opening and closing slowly, and those empty eye sockets seemed to fix on us. Another corpse moved, then another. The tissue that held them in place began to pulse and contract, pushing them forward, helping them move. They pulled free from the walls with wet tearing sounds, leaving dark cavities behind that immediately began to close. "Run!" I yelled. "Run!" We turned and fled back the way we'd come, but the passage was changing. The walls were contracting, the space narrowing with each pulse of that massive heartbeat. Behind us, I could hear shuffling, scraping sounds as those things pulled themselves from their resting places and began to follow. Mark reached the squeeze point first and threw himself into it, his pack scraping against the walls. Sarah went next, and I could see her struggling, the space tighter than it had been just minutes ago. The walls were warm and wet and moving, contracting slowly like the throat of something swallowing. I glanced back and saw them coming, moving with horrible purpose. Their movements were jerky and wrong, limbs bending in directions they shouldn't. The captain was in front, and as I watched, he opened his mouth and that wet, gleaming thing inside flexed and reached forward. I threw myself into the squeeze and immediately realized I was in trouble. The space was too tight now, the walls pressing in from all sides. I could hear Sarah ahead of me, could see Mark's light on the other side, but I couldn't move forward. The tissue around me pulsed and contracted, and I felt something give way beneath my stomach, the floor softening and beginning to pull me down. "John!" Mark's voice, distant and panicked. "John, move!" I pushed with everything I had, my pack catching on something, my helmet scraping rock. Behind me, one of those things reached the squeeze and began to force its way in, its body compressing and bending in ways that made my stomach turn. I could smell it now, that rotting copper smell, and I could feel its breath on the back of my neck. The floor beneath me softened further, and with horror I realized it wasn't just soft, it was dissolving. I could feel the fabric of my pants beginning to stick to it, fibers pulling free, the material weakening. The tissue was digesting me, slowly but surely, breaking me down. With a final desperate heave, I pushed forward, felt something in my chest pop, and when I was through, tumbling, Mark grabbed me and hauled me to my feet. "Go, go, go," Sarah yelled. We ran. The walls pulsed with each heartbeat, narrowing and widening, trying to slow us down. More of those things were appearing, pulling themselves from the walls like hatching insects, their movements growing more coordinated as we watched. The tissue responded to them differently, helping them rather than hindering them, pushing them forward while trying to hold us back. We reached the skeleton and the writing, and I thought we might make it. The entrance was just beyond. Daylight would be just beyond that. We just had to reach the rope, climb up, get in the truck, and leave this nightmare behind. Mark screamed. I turned in time to see him go down hard. The first skeleton we saw latched onto his ankle with a grip that made him cry out in pain. His helmet flew off, the light spinning across the floor. More of them were pouring through the passage behind us. At least 5 or 6 that I could see, and more beyond them. Mark was on his stomach, kicking frantically with his free leg, trying to break loose. The thing that had him wasn't letting go. Its fingers had sunk into his jeans, and where they gripped, I could see dark stains spreading, the fabric dissolving under its touch. Sarah dove for him without hesitation, grabbing his arms, trying to pull him free. Her face was twisted with effort and terror, tears streaming down her cheeks. I've got you, Mark. Just hold on. But the thing was winning, dragging him backward inch by inch toward the others. Mark's fingers scraped against the stone floor, leaving streaks of blood. His eyes found mine, and in them, I saw absolute terror. John, help me. I took a step forward, my hands clenched into fists. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to help them, to grab Mark's other arm, to fight those things off with whatever I had left. Then I saw what was behind Mark. More of them. At least a dozen, shambling forward from the deeper tunnels with those jerky movements. Their bodies bent at wrong angles. The captain was among them, that rotted captain's coat still hanging from his shoulders, and his jaw was working slowly like he was trying to speak. Behind them, the passage itself was closing, the walls contracting in visible waves, the organic tissue flexing and pulsing as it moved. The opening was already half the size it had been, and getting smaller with each heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. Sarah looked up at me, still holding on to Mark, and in her eyes I saw the same realization I'd just had. There wasn't time. Even if we got Mark free right now, even if we somehow got past those things, the passage was collapsing and we had seconds, maybe 30 seconds, maybe less, before we were sealed in here forever with these things and this breathing, digesting nightmare. The passage contracted further. 20 seconds maybe. John, please. Mark's voice was breaking, cracking with fear and pain and desperation. His free leg was kicking at the thing's face, but it didn't seem to notice. Please don't leave me. Sarah, don't let him. I saw the passage ahead constricting further. The opening now barely 3 feet wide. 15 seconds. I saw the things closing in, their hands reaching, their mouths working silently. 10 seconds. I saw Sarah straining to hold on to Mark, her boots losing purchase on the floor as it began to soften beneath her weight. The tissue was responding to her, starting to digest her too. In a few more seconds, she'd be stuck, and then she'd be trapped too, and then we'd all die here. 5 seconds. And I ran. Not toward them. Away. Toward the entrance passage. Toward daylight. Toward escape. Toward being the only one who survived. John! Sarah's scream echoed after me, filled with betrayal and rage and terror and disbelief. John, you coward! Come back! I kept running. My boots pounded against stone that was rapidly becoming flesh, each step sinking slightly before I pushed off again. I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. If I looked back, I would stop, and if I stopped, I would die. Some animal part of my brain had decided that my life was worth more than theirs. No, no, John, please. Mark. Sarah's voice was receding now, but I could still hear her sobbing. Mark, hold on. I won't leave you. I won't. The passage was narrowing fast now, the organic tissue contracting in waves that chased me up toward the surface. Behind me I could hear Sarah crying, could hear Mark begging, could hear the wet sounds of the cave responding to them. The things must have reached them. I heard Sarah scream again. I heard Mark cry out. Heard sounds I will never be able to forget, and can never describe. I kept running. The guilt hit me like a physical blow, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. My legs were moving on their own now. Pure animal panic overriding everything else. Friendship, loyalty, basic human decency. I was going to survive and they were going to die, and that was just how it was going to be. I reached the next chamber, the one we'd passed through on the way in, and I could hear footsteps behind me. Not the shuffling of those corpse things, but the running footsteps of someone alive. I risked a glance back and saw Sarah. She'd let go of Mark. She'd made the same choice I had. Her face was streaked with tears and blood, her own blood, from where one of those things had touched her. She was sobbing as she ran, her breathing ragged and desperate. When she saw me looking back, she screamed something I couldn't make out over the sound of my own heartbeat, and the cave's heartbeat and the wet sliding sounds of those things pursuing us both. We ran together toward the entrance passage, the tunnel that would take us up and out and back to daylight, an air that didn't taste like copper and stone that was actually stone. I could see the opening ahead, that blessed crack of gray light, and then I saw what was between us and it. The passage was contracting, but not evenly. About 15 feet ahead, the walls were pulling together and apart in a rhythmic motion, opening and closing like a sphincter valve, like the cave was swallowing. The opening would dilate to maybe 4 feet wide, then contract down to less than 2 feet, then open again. Thump, thump, open. Thump, thump, closed. If we timed it right, we could slide through it when opened. If we timed it wrong, we'd be caught when it closed. I put on a burst of speed, my lungs burning, my legs screaming. Sarah was right behind me. I could hear her gasping for air. I could hear her boots on the stone that was now flesh. "On 3, she shouted. "We go on 3. I reached the sphincter first. It was open. The passage wide enough to crawl through, but as I approached it began to close, the walls contracting with muscular force. I waited, counted the rhythm. Open for about 3 seconds, closed for 2. Open, closed, open. "Now," Sarah yelled. I threw myself forward and slid through on my stomach, the walls brushing my back and chest as they contracted around me. For one horrible second, I thought I was stuck. Thought the passage would close on me and cut me in half. Then I was through, tumbling into the larger space beyond. I turned back to help Sarah. She was halfway through when the passage spasmed. It wasn't the regular contraction I'd been expecting, but a violent convulsion, like the cave had suddenly clenched every muscle at once. The walls slammed together and caught Sarah's left leg below the knee. She screamed, a sound so full of agony it barely sounded human. "Help me, John! Help me!" I crawled forward, grabbed her outstretched hands, and pulled. She screamed louder, her fingers digging into my wrists hard enough to leave bruises I'd find later. But I couldn't move her. The passage had her leg and it wasn't letting go. When I looked down, I saw why. The floor beneath her was softening, turning from flesh-textured stone into actual flesh. Her caught leg was sinking into it, the fabric of her jeans dissolving where it touched the tissue, and the tissue was moving up her leg, climbing higher, beginning to absorb her. I could see it spreading, see her pants disintegrating, see her skin starting to blister and melt where the flesh touched it. "Pull harder," she screamed. "John, pull!" I pulled. I braced my feet against the wall and pulled with everything I had. Sarah's hands were slipping in my grip, slick with sweat and that viscous fluid that was everywhere now. Behind her, I could hear movement in the tunnel, could hear those things shambling closer. The passage spasmed again, and Sarah shrieked as it crushed her leg further. I heard bone break, saw her knee bend in a direction it shouldn't. It had her up to mid-thigh now, and it was spreading faster. Her shirt was starting to stick to the ground, the fabric pulling apart, threads separating and dissolving. She looked up at me with eyes that were somehow still fighting, still refusing to accept what was happening to her. "Don't you dare leave me. Don't you dare." Behind her, one of those things reached the sphincter. The captain, his rotted face passing through the wall of flesh, pulling into something that might have been a smile. He reached an arm through the flesh, fingers stretching towards Sarah's back. The passage spasmed again, And this time when it clenched, I saw Sarah's eyes go wide with a different kind of pain. The tissue was inside her now. I realized. It had absorbed through her skin and was working on her organs, her blood, everything that made her, her. And the captain's hand was 6 inches from her head. I looked at Sarah. I looked at that hand. I looked at the opening beyond that was starting to close. The exit that would trap me here if I didn't move in the next 5 seconds. Sarah saw it in my face, saw the calculation, saw the decision I was making. John, no, don't you dare. Don't. I let go of her hands. She reached for me, fingers grasping, face twisted with betrayal and desperation. John. I backed up, just out of her reach. The captain's hand was almost on her now. Sarah's hand stretched toward me, fingers splayed. One last desperate attempt to grab me and pull me back into this nightmare with her, to make me share her fate since I'd chosen to abandon her. I kicked her hand away. It wasn't a hard kick. It didn't need to be. Just enough force to knock her arm aside, to give me the extra second I needed to turn and throw myself at the closing gap. Her scream followed me. You coward. I hope it finds you. I hope it never lets you go. I squeezed through the narrowing space, felt tissue close around me, felt it begin to pull and digest and absorb. For one terrible moment I was certain I would die here, stuck halfway between chambers while the cave slowly consumed me, and Sarah's screams echoed in my ears. Then my fingers found purchase on harder stone, real stone, and I pulled with strength born of absolute terror. The tissue tore as I ripped free, leaving strips of my clothes and skin behind, and then I was crawling toward light and air and escape. And then I was out, tumbling down the cliff face, the rope Mark had rigged catching me after a short fall. I hung there, gasping, my entire body shaking, and I heard it. From inside the cave, muffled by rock but still audible, John, please, it's got Sarah, it's... Mark's voice, still alive, still conscious, still begging me to come back. I hauled myself up the rope, ignoring the scream, scrambled to the top of the cliff and ran for Mark's truck. The keys were still in Sarah's pocket, but Mark had hidden a spare under the wheel like he always did. I started the engine with shaking hands and drove away without looking back. I told the police I'd gone alone, that Mark and Sarah had stayed behind planning a different hike, that I'd suggested they check the caves, but they'd seemed more interested in the coastal trail. I lied to their parents, to their friends, to the search and rescue teams that spent 2 weeks looking for them. I lied to everyone. The cave entrance had sealed itself. When the rescuers finally found it 3 days later, it looked like it had been closed for centuries. Just another crack in the rock face that led nowhere. They went in with equipment and cameras and found only stone. The chambers were gone. The passages collapsed. The organic tissue vanished like it had never existed. But I know the truth. I know what's down there, breathing in the dark, digesting my friends slowly over years or decades or centuries. I know that somewhere in that living rock, Mark and Sarah are still conscious, still aware, their bodies breaking down cell by cell while the cave savors them like fine wine. And I know I left them there. I moved away from Jack's Falls 3 weeks after they were declared missing. I couldn't take the looks from their families, couldn't sleep in that apartment knowing they'd helped me move in, couldn't walk past the diner where Sarah used to order extra hash browns and Mark would make fun of her for it. I thought distance would help. It didn't. 3 days after I escaped, I found something in my pocket. The gold coin. The one Mark had pried from the wall. The one that had made it bleed. I don't remember picking it up. I don't remember putting it in my pocket, but there it was, crusted with dried blood that wasn't mine. I threw it in a dumpster 6 blocks from my new apartment. The next morning it was on my nightstand. I drove it 2 hours into the countryside and hurled it into a lake. I watched it sink into dark water. That night I woke up with it clutched in my fist. My hand closed so tight around it that the edges had cut into my palm. My sheets were soaked with sweat and that same sticky residue. My pillow smelled like copper. I tried putting it in a safety deposit box. The bank called me the next day saying there had been some kind of mistake with my box number, and when I went to check, the box was empty and the coin was in my car's cup holder. So now I keep it. I carry it with me everywhere because I've learned that fighting it only makes things worse. And every day it gets a little warmer. Every day I can feel it pulse a little stronger. That rhythmic beat that matches what I heard in the cave. Sometimes when I hold it, I can hear them. Not voices exactly, but something like voices. A distant screaming that might be wind in a tunnel, or might be something else. And buried under that sound, 2 words repeated over and over in Sarah's voice. Come back. Come back. Last week I caught myself looking up driving directions to Jack's Falls. I don't remember opening my phone. I don't remember typing anything. But there it was, route calculated, estimated arrival time 3:47 a.m. The coin is getting hotter. Last night it burned my palm when I held it, leaving a mark that looks disturbingly like a mouth. And when I sleep I dream of tunnels, of warm, wet walls that pulse with life, of my friends embedded in red tissue, their eyes following me as I walk past. And the worst part? The part that keeps me up at night? Staring at the ceiling, unable to escape what I've done? Sometimes when I hold the coin, I can hear the heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. And I know with absolute certainty that it's waiting for me to come back. The cave remembers me. It tasted me when I tore free, got a sample of what I am, and now it wants the rest. It's patient. This thing that's been alive since before humans learned to make fire, since before the pirates stumbled into its mouth and became just another meal to be savored over centuries. It can wait. It has time. And eventually, whether from guilt or curiosity or some pull I can't even begin to understand, I know I'll go back. The cave is patient and it hungers. If you're reading this and you live near Jack's Falls, stay away from the cliffs north of town. Don't go looking for cave entrances or pirate treasure. Don't investigate if you hear sounds coming from the rock face. And if you do go, despite this warning, despite everything I've told you, if you find yourself in tunnels that feel too warm, if you see coins embedded in flesh-like walls, if you hear a heartbeat echoing through the dark, run. Don't look back. Don't try to save anyone. Don't hesitate. Just run. And pray it lets you go. It was 4 p.m. on a Thursday when my phone buzzed with a notification. I had just returned from my last class of the day, and wanted nothing else than to lie on the lumpy dorm mattress and nap. I fumbled around, checking every pocket I might have placed the thing until I found it hiding in my sweatshirt. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the notification that filled the screen. Hey, Silver. Those 2 words immediately took me back to the long days of high school, where a single girl kept me going, day after day, with the mere hope of talking to her. Lily. I stared at the message for a long time before my phone buzzed again with a new notification. Wanna go on an adventure tonight? I need a friend right now. Hell yes. I deleted the text after typing it out, contemplating my next words extremely carefully. Eventually I settled on, yeah, sure, I'm down. Lily responded almost immediately. Great, I knew I could count on you. Winky face. My heart thumped wildly in my chest. I had to pinch myself just to make sure I wasn't dreaming. Before I could fantasize about her any longer, another text buzzed my phone. It was a location pin. Quickly inputting the address into Google Maps revealed the pin to be in Blackwater, a small, mostly abandoned town nestled in the hills and forests of southern Indiana. Nearly a 3-hour drive from my university. I had never heard of the place before, and, judging by the pictures online, it didn't seem like a place I would likely visit. Broken down homes, abandoned schools, old, crumbling factories. Not to mention the gas money alone would eat into what little savings I had. However, with the buzz of my phone, I was swiftly reminded why I was going. Can't wait to catch up tonight. It has been too long. That evening, as the sun began to set, I threw on my best pair of jeans, loaded up in my old, beat-up Honda Civic, and made the almost 3-hour drive east. I wish I could say I was at least a little skeptical or hesitant about that drive. But in reality, I was too distracted thinking about what I was going to say once I actually saw her. Our agreed meeting location was an old Waffle House just outside of Blackwater. Lily was already there, leaning against her car in all black, when I eventually pulled up around midnight. "Hey there, Silver," she said with a smile. I hated the nickname, but for her I made an exception. "Hey there," I said, getting out of my car. "How have you been?" "Oh, you know," she said, hugging me. I froze. We were friends in high school. Not that kind of friendly, though. The sudden change filled me with renewed hope. Before I could return the hug, she stepped back towards her car. "You ready?" she asked, bending over into the passenger side door. Her leggings left little to the imagination. I felt my face flush red. "Yeah, ready as I'll ever be. What's the plan?" "Oh, breaking, entering, that sort of deal," she said, hauling out a large, cumbersome backpack from her car. "Wait, what now?" I asked. Lily chuckled. "Don't worry, I'm just kidding." She punched my arm. "But before that, you eat yet?" We ended up in a corner booth on the otherwise empty Waffle House, a plate of crispy bacon shared between us. Throughout high school, Lily and I were good friends, but never anything more. I was too much of a coward back then, so never got the chance to ask her out or tell her how I felt. By the time I gathered up the courage, she had already moved away for college. The old Lily was the kind of girl whose version of Crazy Night was a Star Wars movie marathon with popcorn. New Lily was someone completely different. Her blonde hair now had a streak of red, and she took great joy rolling up her shirt sleeve to show off the tattoos that now covered her left arm. The way she gleefully described each black spider and ram head reminded me of how much she had changed since I had last seen her. But her smile with the chipped tooth remained the same. Her enchanting green eyes were still the ones I struggled to hold eye contact with. And she was still a huge nerd. "So, what's with the backpack?" I asked, gesturing to the bag which took up half her booth. You know, just school textbooks, homework, that sort of thing. I'm a library science major now, so I get to see all the old basement books and..." Her hand struck the bag with a thwack. "Have to haul some around." An hour ticked by in the blink of an eye. It felt exhilarating to reminisce and joke with Lily again, but there was something nagging at the back of my thoughts the entire time. I started. "What's all this about?" "What's what about?" "You know," I gestured around. "This." Lily took a deep breath. I just need a good friend tonight," she finally admitted. Hesitating only for a moment, I reached across the table and scooped her hand in mine, giving it a gentle squeeze. "It's okay. You can tell me." "It's my mom." Her eyes watered, but she quickly blinked away any tears. "She passed away a year ago today." I was never good with comforting grief. "I'm sorry." Lily grasped my hand in both of hers and looked directly into my eyes. I have a huge ask of you. Yeah, I said, blushing. Whatever you need. I need to go there, where she died, but I need you there with me. Cool night air whipped past us as we stepped outside, though my face still felt warm. You mind if I drive? Lily asked. My car is making a weird noise and I could use your help. Yeah, sure, but are you sure about this? I asked. Yes, I need to be there. It was not what I anticipated when she first texted me, although in all honesty, I don't know what I was expecting, but I was going to stick it out, not just because I had already driven all the way to Blackwater, but because Lily needed me. I remember meeting Lily's mother all those years ago. She was sweet and kind, and the two of them shared a bond that made most parents envious. Lily never mentioned how she passed and I didn't push. Blackwater was as dreary and run down as the pictures online portrayed. In the darkness of the overcast night, the buildings took on a haunted, accursed look and feel that made me slightly uneasy. Lily didn't seem to mind, however. She had returned to her bubbly and energetic self. Don't let my confession weigh you down, she said as we cruised through the derelict streets. My mom wouldn't want us to be sad remembering her. Her car never ended up making a noise, though I wrote it off, not thinking too much about it. Our destination came shortly after in the form of a long, overgrown driveway, disappearing into the trees and hills beyond. Lily turned onto the road. A tall, wrought iron fence greeted us with the gate sitting fully open. Ah, crap, Lily muttered, seeing the gate. What's wrong? I asked. The gate's open, Lily said. Means there's a cop up there. How do you know? What is this place? Lily slouched back in the driver's seat and thought for a minute. Lily, what is this place? I repeated. We'll drive a minute or so down the road and hike back on foot, she said, avoiding my question. The answer would soon present itself as Lily threw her car into reverse and the headbeam swept across the overgrown landscaping. A large sign hanging from the fence read, Blackwater Regional Hospital. A hospital? Are you sure that's a good idea? It's the hospital where my mom spent her last moments. Shut down not long after. She said before muttering, There shouldn't be a cop here. Gonna make everything harder. We could go somewhere else. I don't want you getting hurt in there, I offered. I'll be fine. You're too sweet. We left the car on the side of the road about a half-mile past the gate. Lily insisted on bringing her backpack, despite its size. The wrought iron was easy enough to clamber over, and we were free to wander the grounds on our way to the hospital. There were several overgrown walking trails carved through the forest. Following those, we quickly reached the parking lot. The hospital was huge, 3 stories tall with a large clock tower above the main entrance. Thick ivy and sprawling vines scaled the walls and wormed in through cracked and broken windows. From the trees we could see the cruiser of the lone state trooper stationed on the opposite end of the parking lot. Its lights were off, and the trooper was likely asleep, or so I hoped. Lily patted me on the shoulder and led me around the back of the building where a shattered window on the first floor gave us free access to the inside. She threw her bag in before easily crawling in, using an empty trash can as a step stool. Wow, you know your way around here, I joked as I hopped in through the window. No, I haven't been here in a while. The corridors were an eerie mixture of peeling pastels and littered floors. Several of the walls were covered in graffiti, the spray cans responsible laying dejectedly underneath their masterpieces. I picked up one. It worked, surprisingly. Although it was mostly empty. It was obvious the hospital had been abandoned suddenly. Gurneys still lined the hallways. Several doors sat wide open to operating rooms or recovery suites. I peered my head into one, only to see what looked like a red pentagram spray painted on the wall with a list of names next to it, each crossed out. Eventually we reached the lobby. Despite the grandeur of the hospital, the lobby was comparatively small. A single check-in window with an overturned desk behind it, a handful of benches, 2 elevators, each crossed out with police tape, and a stairwell opposite the main entrance. Lily dropped her backpack onto one of the empty benches and pulled out 2 full cans of spray paint. She tossed me one, which I fumbled catching. It got a good laugh out of her, which made my heart flutter. "I'm never coming back here," Lily said, shaking her can. "Let's make it a worthy send-off." The next half hour was spent running up and down the hallways, doodling anything and everything we could imagine. My crude drawing of a purple appendage got a chuckle out of her. Her red star got a round of applause out of me. As far as first dates go, it was definitely unique. But I couldn't complain. "You're a natural artist," Lily commented as I put the finishing touches on my magnum opus. It was a large smiley face with its tongue sticking out. "Why, thank you," I said, my can finally coughing empty. "What shall—" A pair of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor behind us. Lily hissed, grabbing me and diving for cover in a nearby room. Where we ended up was the floor of a janitor's supply closet, complete with mop buckets and large push brooms. We whispered apologies as we carefully wiggled our way into comfortable positions. The closet was too cramped to fully close the door. I had to hold it mostly shut and pray nobody would see us. Not a moment later, the beam of a flashlight cut through the darkness outside the door. The footsteps stopped. Lily and I squeezed together to peer through the narrow gap. Her body pressed into mine, and I hoped and prayed. She couldn't feel my heartbeat racing. The scent of her vanilla perfume was intoxicating. It took everything I had not to wrap my arms around her and pull her in closer. It wasn't the time for that. "Got a 1076. A man's deep voice came from the other side of the door. A radio crackled to life. "Go ahead, Dutch," a female voice on the radio said. "I got some kids going through the old hospital in Backwater." A pause. 10-4, need backup? 10-10, the trooper said, walking past the supply closet. "But I'm thinking the same one is back. Found some more of those pentagrams." With that, the officer disappeared down the hallway and turned the corner. His voice continued to echo, but grew more distant until he walked through a door, and his voice stopped with a metallic click. Several minutes after the officer left, Lily scooted around to look at me, our faces mere inches apart. We sat there for a long time, both of us breathing heavily in the small space. Being so close to Lily, not to mention the exhilaration of almost being caught, left me on a high of adrenaline and anxiety. A volatile concoction. For the first time I can remember, I held contact with those bright green eyes. Nothing else mattered more to me. Lily reached out and ran her fingers through my hair. She playfully tousled the strands. There was a slight pinch on the side of my head, and I flinched in response. Sorry," Lily said. I didn't think that would hurt." "It's okay," I said, but the mood was dead. Eventually we left the closet and quietly continued on our adventure. "This place took so much from me," Lily said. "The least it could do is bring me one night of joy." So I made it my goal to make her happy. We played tag on the first floor, hide and seek on the second, all the while avoiding the trooper as he prowled the halls searching for us. There were several moments when I thought he would catch us, but luckily, we evaded him easily enough. It became a game in itself at one point. Lily vanished for a while, only to suddenly reappear and scare me half to death, claiming she had to use the restroom. It was 3 a.m. when we finally headed back towards the lobby. We were walking down the stairs when Lily stopped. I told you it would be an adventure, she said, smirking. You did warn me, I said with a chuckle. She grabbed my hand in both of hers and leaned in close, whispering into my ear, My turn to repay you for tonight. Her lips grazed my cheek and planted a wet kiss on my neck. My whole body froze, but my blood pressure spiked. There's more where that came from. Well, I wish there was a witty back and forth that followed. There wasn't. I stood there in absolute shock, barely processing her words. Seemingly pleased with the effect she had on me, Lily slowly stepped back. With a bite of her lip and a flick of her hair, she disappeared down the next flight of stairs. I stood there, listening to her footsteps echo through the stairwell. It took me longer than I would otherwise like to admit to fully compose myself. When it all finally processed, I chased after her, but the lobby was empty as I rounded the landing. Lily? I called. The response came from the flight of stairs leading to the basement, reverberating off the concrete walls. Down here, silly. No, Lily, come up here, I said. I walked to the edge of the stairs, looking down at the dark landing below where it turned and jutted deeper into the earth. Oh, Silver! Something small and dark sailed through the air and hit the top of the landing with a near-silent poof. It was Lily's black long-sleeve shirt. A blossom of warmth flushed across my face. I stuttered over my next words, struggling to pick the right ones. What if... No, please, can you just... Despite the buffering in my head, my feet remained planted. We stood there in that mental tug-of-war for a long moment before Lily sighed in defeat. Fine, she said. You're no fun. The small insult hurt, but the relief made it worth it. Wait, what? Lily whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. Lily? Oh my God, Lily shrieked. Oh my God, what is that? I heard nothing except her footsteps and screaming disappeared deeper into the basement. The human body is an incredible product of thousands of years of biological evolution. It is so incredible, in fact, that most of the human population have two distinct and independent brains, one in the chest and one in the head. And in a moment like that, and every moment leading up to it, I was thinking with the wrong one. My footsteps echoed through the hospital as I barreled down the stairwell, using the railing to swing myself around at the landing. A pipe laid across the floor, almost tripping me, but I grasped it and wielded it like a bat. I stopped as soon as I stepped onto the last flight of stairs. The corridor beyond was nearly pitch black. There was almost no light save for a faint orange hue flickering through an open door halfway down the hallway. The air was cold, frosty even, and stale, with a distinct tinge of rust, antiseptic, and vomit. I accidentally kicked a rattle can on the stairs, its metallic pangs making me flinch as they reverberated through the darkness. Lily? I called out. Nothing. Glass crunched under my shoe as I slowly reached the final step. The smell was stronger now, more forceful. Bile rose in my throat, but I forced it down. That was when my foot grazed against something on the floor. A shoe, then another. Socks after those, followed by a pair of jeans. Lily's stripped clothing led suggestively towards the room with the flickering light, though there remained no sign of Lily. I hesitantly followed the lure, noting that many of the doors were covered with police tape. Scratches dug into the floor like drag marks, although they were much older. Strange blotches of red and brown stains dotted the walls. I reached the glowing door. My hands ached as my grip on the pipe tightened till my knuckles turned white. The room beyond was a surgical clinic, a stretcher laid out in the middle, medical cabinets lining the walls. There was nothing that would have been out of place for a hospital. That was, except for the candles. There were hundreds, maybe even thousands, of red candles covering the floor and furniture. Their wicks sputtered as they burned, releasing a putrid smell that could best be described as rot, decay, and death. The bile returned with a heavy cough as my breath caught. Pulling my sweatshirt over my nose did little to mitigate the smell. I almost left right there, when something caught my attention. Lily's backpack sat on the gurney, books and tomes spilling out. "Lily," I hissed. No response. Carefully, I stepped deeper into the room. Small gaps between the candles gave me a slim walkway through the wax towards the gurney. The tomes splayed out on the stained sheets looked old and delicate. I dragged my fingers along one of the covers. It had the feel of a strange worn leather, not the familiarity of cow's hide. Several of the books had numerous colorful sticky notes peeking out from between yellowed pages. I opened one of the tomes. It sat center stage, the largest and most denoted. Upon its cover bore a simple image of an eye. Firelight danced across its aged pages like dancing demons. Each of the manuscripts were brimming with dense sprawls of strange text, accompanied by horrid, brutal portraits. One page depicted strange, cloaked figures, dragging bound swine, cattle, and humans towards a burning hole. A blue sticky note next to the illustration read, "Contract, question, question, question mark. 03/27/2010 through 03/27/2011. Then I reached the most denoted chapter and my blood ran cold. One of the pages folded out to be several times the tome's size. An enormous illustration of a grotesque, foul beast. An impossibly long and spiraling monster with the body of a centipede. Its carapace was dotted with an infinite number of eyes. Legs like human arms, winding and winding, staring, judging, hunger and pride and wrath. Beneath the portrait read a single line of text. Pandemonium regnat resonat erigit. I went to close the book when something poked my palm. Two small white triangles stuck out from the bottom of the book, sharper and newer than one of the regular pages. I tugged at the white corners only for two photographs to slide free of the accursed tome. One I recognized to be Lily's mom. She sat in a recliner, a wide smile plastered on her face. A lock of hair similar to hers was taped to the top corner, but it was the second photograph that caused my hands to shake holding them. It was me. An older picture, likely from high school, but it was unmistakably me. And just like the previous picture, a small bundle of my hair was taped to the photo. I slammed the book shut, crumpling several of the pages between the covers. I whimpered, grabbing at my collar, suddenly feeling claustrophobic. What the? It was then I noticed something that had eluded me earlier. A single candle in the far corner of the room, partially obscured by some decrepit medical equipment. It was burned out, smoke wisping from the snuffed wick. I don't know why I found it so strange. For a couple seconds I stared at it. Another wick fizzled out, this one right next to the previous. Then another. Slowly, the candles began to die, emanating from that corner and making a direct path for me. I stumbled back, stepping on several of the candles as I did, only for the flames to begin dying faster. A heavy metal boom reverberated throughout the room. I spun around only to witness with dawning horror that the thick, reinforced door of the surgical room had been slammed shut. Careful not to step on any more candles, I rushed to the door and began pounding on the pressure-treated glass. "Lily!" I shouted. "Lily, are you there?" There was sobbing on the other side of the door, deep and guttural. "Sorry. I'm so sorry." Lily wept, her voice muffled through the heavily insulated walls. The metal pipe connected with the window. Nothing. Again, nothing. A third swing, then a fourth, followed by a fifth. With the sixth swing, the pipe fell to the ground with a metallic pang. The vibrations from the strikes painfully reverberated through my hands and fingers. Sorry. I grabbed a nearby IV stand. With a swift kick, I separated the wheelbase from the pole and jabbed the broken end into a small gap between the door and wall. My shoes slid against the concoction of melted wax, dirt, and rust that covered the epoxy floors. It wouldn't matter as the IV stand quickly bent out of shape the second my feet gained purchase on the ground. A quick glance behind me almost made me whimper in defeat. The dead candles had made it to the gurney in the center of the room. The candle demon was drawing closer. It was only a matter of time now until it reached me. I planted my back against the door and slid down till my butt hit the floor, pulling my legs close to me. I buried my head in my arms and let the tears flow freely. Lily continued to sob on the other side, interspersed with repetitions of sorry. Then it stopped. There was silence on the other side of the door for what felt like an eternity, but just as a wick died only a few feet from me, I heard the distinct sound of heavy footsteps approaching the door. The door flew open, catching me by surprise and sending me tumbling backwards into the corridor. A flashlight immediately trained on my face. Well, the trooper drawled. Got you. The state trooper grasped me by my hood and hauled me to my feet. I struggled to keep my legs beneath me, a mixture of relief and fear causing them to feel like jelly. Come on, the trooper said, pushing me towards the stairs. Thank you, I managed in a weak voice. You won't be thanking me for long. You're going straight to... No! A blood-curdling scream echoed from behind us. We both turned to see Lily, there in the middle of the hallway. She stood at the end of the corridor, past the glowing door, just barely within the flashlight's illumination. She was stripped down to her underwear, revealing the lattice and cross patches of scars and fresh cuts that covered her right arm and chest. Her cheeks shimmered with fresh tears. Something metallic glinted in the light. She held a large, ornate knife in one hand, the blade freshly stained red. Jesus Christ, the trooper muttered under his breath. What the hell did you do to her? Lily, no, I stammered. Shut up, he hissed, shoving me down hard onto the last step and handcuffing one of my wrists to the railing. No, I didn't do anything to her. I protested. I said shut it. The trooper jabbed a finger at me before turning to Lily. Ma'am, put the knife down. I'm here to help. The trooper held out one hand while the other hovered near his taser. He slowly crept down the hallway, only sparing a quick glance into the glowing room as he reached it. Before the trooper could open his mouth to say anything more, the candle closest to the open surgical room door died. What happened next occurred in the blink of an eye. A fraction of a second, the state trooper, standing in the middle of the corridor, was suddenly and violently propelled into the wall. His body struck the surface with such an immense and terrible force. The sickening sound of bones snapping and crushing, of his skin, muscles, and organs bursting. What was once a 6-foot 1-inch man was reduced to a thick, coagulate sludge of human debris and tattered clothing no more than a few inches thick. It stayed on the wall for a few seconds before slowly sliding down into a horrid mess on the floor. I couldn't breathe. The shock had stolen my breath and blurred my vision. It was impossible to steal my gaze away from the grotesque remains on the floor. The trooper's flashlight had been torn from his grip when he fell and now lay dejectedly pointing at the wall opposite. Bare footsteps smacked against the epoxy floors as Lily swiftly began towards me from the darkness. Hey, wait. I put up my free hand as I reached behind me for anything I could defend myself with. Lily passed through the beam of the flashlight. Her soulless, tear-filled eyes stared at me like a mechanic would a tool. The ornate blade still firmly in her grip. "Lily, wait!" Just as Lily began to reach for me, my fingers finally gained purchase on the lip of a rattle can. I whipped the can around and sprayed it directly in her face, orange paint going everywhere. She sputtered and coughed, holding her hands out as a barrier as she stumbled backwards. I continued spraying until the cans wheezed empty. I threw it at her before groping around blindly behind me for another. Lily slipped on the growing pool of red and gray fluid emerging from the remains of the state trooper. She fell backward into one of the nearby door frames. There was a hollow pop followed by an ear-piercing wail. Lily screamed, grasping her wrist. I pulled at my cuffs, but to no avail. Lily wiped at her face, orange paint coming off in streaks. She began to cry and moan, alternating between rubbing her eyes and cradling her wrist. A glint from the pile of flesh near my feet stole my attention. A key. I scrambled down as far as the cuffs would let me and stretched for it, kicking around blindly with my shoe. Lily groaned in pain, propping herself against the doorframe as she slowly stood. Her bloodshot eyes narrowed on me. What have you done?" she muttered. With sloppy, uneasy steps, Lily staggered towards me, wrath and hatred plastered on her face as her lips curled downwards into a scowl. You were supposed to die." For an instant, something flashed on Lily's face. The rage was replaced with something else, a familiar recognition and knowing terror. Suddenly, just as the trooper before her, Lily was propelled backwards into the darkness of the hallway at a horrific speed. Her scream choked out as the sudden thrash stole her breath. A wet thumping sound came from the darkness ahead of me. "Please," Lily shrilled. I continued to blindly kick around, praying with all my might that the keys would present themselves. "Please don't." Crack. "I'm sorry." Pop. "Mommy, I just want..." Snap. Tears streamed down my face, hot and fast and free. The keys skitter across the floor towards me. A miracle it was that they did not slide farther away. I quickly loosened the cuffs and scrambled up the stairs on my hands and knees. I crashed through the lobby. Through my panic, I found the front door. Throwing my whole body weight into it proved fruitless, especially after seeing the chain and padlock on the inside. Likely the trooper's doing. Cursing the dead man, I continued on, trying every door and window I stumbled upon. Each find deflated my hope more and more. Nearly every entrance point was covered by plywood or locked. After a few minutes of frantically searching the now ominous and unfamiliar corridors, I stopped to catch my breath. My heart thumped against my chest with such force, I feared I was having a heart attack. It was the only sound I could hear in the hauntingly silent hospital. There was not even the comforting whisper of a soft breeze. Then I had an idea. I felt around, checking my pockets until I found my phone in the back of my jeans. Withdrawing it proved fruitless, as I was met with a spiderweb of white cracks covering the black screen. I threw it down the hallway in frustration. The broken device skidded across the floor. Thoom. I glanced down the hallway, thinking the phone had knocked something over. The ground shook slightly. A chill ran down my spine. Thoom, thoom, thoom. I barreled through the hospital. My only hope was the lone open window on the first floor. The ground increasingly shook with my every step. Hoarse, high-pitched wailing bellowed somewhere behind me. These were not the sounds of mourning and grief, but of exultation and feverish joy. It was getting closer. I dared not turn around, afraid of what might be staring back. My shoes slipped as I rounded the corner, almost sending me tumbling to the ground, for a glimpse of hope presented itself. The window. I put what little strength I still had remaining into the final sprint. A hot, foul breath percolated on the back of my neck. Slight tugs pulled at the ends of my clothes, as if 1,000 hands just out of reach were grasping for me. I could not stop, not that close to the window. With one last push, I vaulted through the small opening, but not before the foul beast behind me dug its long, sharp nails into my ankle as I jumped. The cold, rough ground greeted me with a hard embrace as I landed shoulder first into the dirt. The candle demon violently crashed into the window right after me, causing large, deep cracks to burst open across the exterior wall. But it did not follow. A scream bellowed from my lips, blending with the unholy sobs which echoed from the hospital. I gripped my ankle. It was warm and sticky and hurt so bad I didn't even care about the pain blossoming in my shoulder. It was weak under weight, but I would not sit there a minute longer. I glimpsed towards the window as I stood. A swirl of 12 eyes stared back at me. The beast thrashed about against the walls of the hospital as I hobbled through the forest. I could hear the thunderous crashes of immense weight against crumbling concrete and brick. Lily's car remained where we had left it. It made sense now why she wanted to drive us. I was never meant to leave this place. Her window shattered with a swift elbow to the middle of the pane. I clambered in and popped the cover of the steering wheel. Wires popped and hissed, but the car refused to cling to life. A warm orange light suddenly illuminated through the woods. I couldn't see what it was, but the smell of smoke quickly confirmed my worst fears. Outside, a tree toppled over, the groan of its collapse accompanied by a distant hoarse wail. "Please, please," I begged, sparking the wires off each other. It took several more tries for the engine to finally turn over. Once the straight six coughed to life, I immediately threw it into drive. Tires screeched on asphalt as the car jumped the curve, almost going off into the trees again. As I sped away, I looked again at the growing fire through the woods, past the rows and rows of trees. A long, dark shape was moving through the thicket, backlit by the roaring flames. It was free. Oh God, it was free. I didn't stop as I floored it out of town, almost hitting the decrepit "Welcome to Blackwater" sign as I did. The sun was starting to rise when I made it back to the university. I had no idea where else to go. I considered going to the police, but that would likely not end well for me. It wouldn't take much for them to tie me to the deaths and fire. It has been several weeks now since Lily and I's adventure. At first, I tried to act like everything was normal. I went to dinner with friends, played video games, attended my classes, but that night still haunts me. I see a dark, coiling figure in the corner of my vision, a multitude of eyes staring at me from the shadowy corners of rooms. My roommates have complained several times of me screaming and thrashing in the night. I awake covered in sweat with my ankle throbbing with pain. The wounds have refused to heal no matter how much time has passed. In those final moments at the hospital, when that hand dug into the flesh around my ankle, it left a deep gouge around the joint in the shape of a human hand. But it was all wrong. Too many digits, too many knuckles. It occasionally flares with a crippling pain that will leave me on the verge of unconsciousness. I don't know what to do. I'm scared and alone. The beast is getting closer. It has to be. Last night, I laid in my bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep came fitfully, if at all, since that night. A bare branch knocked against my window like a bone against stone. Knock, 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 knock. My breathing became erratic as I heard something walk through my bedroom, its steps like fingernails on wood. Knock, 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 knock. From my head to my feet, My body shivered and shook uncontrollably. The bed frame creaked as something put weight on it at the other end. I slowly raised my head, my movements jerky and uncertain. An inky darkness had settled in my bedroom, coating and covering everything within. The pale moonlight streaking through the window did little to pierce into void, but it managed just enough to catch in the eyes staring at me from the foot of my bed. I've worked at Daryl's Pizza since I was 14. It's the only restaurant left open late into the night. It sits past the last streetlight on the edge of town. The building looks newer than it is, like it learned how to survive by pretending. Inside everything is clean but worn down in a way that feels intentional. Red vinyl booths cracked just enough to show their age. A pinball machine hums quietly in the corner. An old racing game loops the same track it's probably shown for decades. The smell is what gets you first. It's familiar in a way that doesn't make sense, like something you remember from before you were old enough to form memories. A few locals sit in the booths most nights. They don't talk much. They don't need to. When you look at them too long, you get the strange sense that you've known them forever without ever learning their names. Daryl usually runs the register himself. He's tall, thin, and looks like he hasn't slept properly in years. His hair is long, dark, and always looks slightly oily, no matter how often he washes it. He sweats constantly, straight into his apron, and somehow never seems embarrassed by it. He also makes the best pizza I've ever eaten. The sauce is unreal. Rich, sweet, sharp in a way I can't place. The first time I tasted it, I remember thinking something felt wrong. Not spoiled, just aware. Like it knew I was there, like it recognized me. Or maybe that was just my imagination running ahead of itself. That thought disappears the second it hits my tongue. My dad is the chief of police, and he buys Daryl's Pizza for the department at least once a week. Says it keeps morale up. That's probably the only reason Daryl hired me in the first place. Most mornings, I'm there before sunrise, making dough beside him while he stirs the sauce. He keeps the radio on low, usually My Chemical Romance, and works with the focus of someone performing a ritual he's done too many times to count. I asked him once what his secret was. He slowed his stirring, turned the radio down, and told me it was an old family recipe passed down from his great-grandfather. He said it the same way someone recites something they don't fully believe anymore. When I pressed him, he rolled his eyes and hissed like I'd insulted him. Italians. The thing is, Daryl doesn't look Italian. He's far too pale, and he hates garlic. Hates it in a way that feels personal. I found that out the hard way. I had barely finished asking about adding garlic to a pizza when his expression changed. He lifted one long, untrimmed finger, pale, almost gray under the fluorescent lights, and pointed at the door. "Get out," he said, "and never come back with garlic. Ever." I don't remember him touching me. Somehow I ended up outside. The door shut behind him, trying to piece together how I'd gotten there. The next morning, I barely had time to step inside before he was in front of me. I didn't hear him approach. He grabbed my shoulder hard enough to make my vision blur. "You didn't bring me any garlic, did you?" His voice didn't sound like his voice. His eyes looked wrong. Too dark, too sharp, like he was focusing on something just past me. "No, sir," I said. The pressure vanished instantly. He laughed, light and familiar, like it had all been a joke. My shoulder burned for hours afterward. Nothing else strange happened for a while, except the freezer in the basement. It lets out a loud sound I can only describe as screaming. I've told him more than once that it needs to be fixed. He says the noise somehow makes the sauce taste better. No one but Daryl is allowed in the basement. He says it's where he keeps the spices, the recipe, and the grinder he uses for the tomatoes. He also says there's no light down there, but that's fine because he's used to working without them. Sometimes when the noise gets too loud, he goes down and kicks the freezer until it quiets. I can hear him talking to it while he's down there. Low, teasing like he's joking with a person. He tells it he'll make sauce out of it if it doesn't behave. Sometimes I hear a softer sound right before he kicks it, something that almost sounds like whimpering. When he comes back upstairs, he's always smiling, wiping his hands on his apron. Once, early in the morning, we ran out of sauce. Daryl told me to mind the counter while he went downstairs. I heard the grinder start. A second later, the sound began. Louder than I'd ever heard it. The shelves rattled. From the basement, Daryl cranked the radio. "This Is How I Disappear" blasted through the floorboards, the drums pounding hard enough to almost drown it out. I stayed where I was and stared at the front door. When he came back up, he carried 2 containers of fresh sauce. Thick, dark red. The smell hit me and made my mouth water before I could stop it. Sharp and metallic, like copper. "That's how you know it's fresh," he said, smiling at my reaction. For all his faults, Daryl calls me his friend. Daryl loves classic first-person shooters, older Call of Duty titles, Halo. He beats me every time, never rushing, never reacting too late. The strange part is how still he is while he plays. No blinking, no frustration, just a calm focus that makes me think he's spent far too long indoors, practicing while the rest of us were asleep. He lives in an apartment attached to the back of the shop. Inside, it's furnished like a tiny castle. Heavy wood furniture, thick curtains, everything built to last 100 years. He says it's an Italian thing. I don't argue. People with furniture like that usually know how to hide a potty. His wife and kids are polite to the point of being unsettling. They all look alike, pale, sickly, like they've never seen real sunlight. The kids are homeschooled and speak like adults who've had time to rehearse. Before I could drive, and when my dad was busy, my grandfather used to pick me up after my shifts. He hated Daryl. Every time his old Jeep pulled into the lot, Daryl would already be standing in the front window, framed perfectly by the headlights. They'd stare at each other without moving. No words, no blinking, just waiting. I asked my grandfather about it once, after we finally drove away. He only shrugged and muttered something about late payments, his voice low and final, an answer that wasn't meant to invite more questions. My grandfather was a farmer. Daryl came from one of those old Italian families that took pride in tradition, especially buying tomatoes and fresh vegetables locally, and Daryl bought his tomatoes from my grandfather. He always had. The thing was, my grandfather was one of the biggest garlic growers around. Acres of it, pungent, overpowering, impossible to ignore, and Daryl hated garlic. I think it infuriated him that my grandfather grew the one thing he couldn't stand, and that people bought it anyway, that he depended on the very hands of despised, that my grandfather didn't need him. Every time the headlights swept across the front window and caught Daryl standing there, I felt it again, that silent hatred settling between them like a loaded gun. It was a contest of will, held steady and unspoken. I always had the sense that one night, one of them would finally blink. The blink finally came at my grandfather's funeral, held on the farm. A small wooden platform had been built near the fields, his casket resting just below it. One by one, people stood to speak. Before retiring, my grandfather had been the county sheriff. Our family had been rooted in that land for as long as anyone could remember. They talked about what the town used to be, dirty, overrun with gangs and predators who moved openly. Fear treated like a fact of life. They spoke about my grandfather's actions, the choices he made, the lines he drew, how slowly but decisively the town changed. Crime withered, people slept easier, children grew up without learning which streets to avoid. What had once been lawless became quiet, safe, clean. The sun slipped beneath the horizon as the last speaker sat down. A few lights flickered on. A fire burned nearby, steady and low. I wasn't paying much attention until I looked up and saw the next man approaching the platform, moving slowly between the old wooden folding chairs. I froze. It was Daryl. He didn't so much walk as drift, as if the ground had loosened its hold on him. His feet barely seemed to touch the earth as he reached the steps and rose to the stand, carried upward by something unseen. When he arrived, Daryl blinked and brushed away a tear. The air shifted, then he spoke. He spoke of a great man and a great family. His voice calm, weighted with memories that no longer had a living owner. He told the story of his great-grandfather, who came to this country fleeing a place that despised him for his beliefs, and how my family had welcomed them with open arms, offering help when they needed it most. He chose his words carefully, letting each one settle before allowing the next. He spoke for a long time. No one interrupted him. No one looked away. It was as if everyone there had fallen under the same spell, breathing together, listening together, held in place by his voice. When he finally stepped down, the silence broke all at once. People stood and applauded. Daryl drifted back between the chairs. He stopped to embrace my grandmother. I didn't know what to make of it. Tears blurred my vision when I looked at my father. He stood rigid and unmoving, his expression unchanged. Not even grief crossed his face. Not even when Daryl stopped in front of us. For a long moment, the two of them locked eyes. The air tightened. Everything else seemed to fall away. My father didn't blink. Daryl didn't look away. Finally, Daryl spoke. "I'm sorry for your loss." The words were gentle, almost kind, but something about them felt wrong, rehearsed, as if they had been spoken before, as if they would be spoken again. He extended his hand. My father took it. The shake was slow and deliberate. Neither of them looked down. When they released, my father's face remained unchanged, or perhaps too much had passed. Then Daryl turned to me and offered his hand. I took it. His skin was ice cold, sharp and unnatural, cutting through the warmth of the light. I felt it instantly, a shiver running through me, but I didn't pull away. Daryl nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and moved on. I walked away with my hand still cold, realizing I had just touched something I was never meant to feel. My father is different around Daryl. No jokes, no smiles. It's all business. He's still the chief of police. I've been helping run the farm, and I also work at Daryl's on Fridays and Saturdays, his busiest nights. I'm taking classes at the local community college, hoping to follow in my father's footsteps. A few days ago, I met Daryl's niece. She's my age, pale skin, dark hair, dark eyes that linger a second too long, like she knows exactly what she's doing. Her smile is sharp, dangerous. It feels aimed directly at me. Daryl has never liked her, even before she arrived. He complained about the trouble she'd gotten into. He warned me not to fall under her spell. He was right. I just didn't expect how impossible it would feel to resist. I keep wondering if this is how it starts, and whether surviving the next encounter is something I should even be hoping for. That night, Daryl left me and her to clean up when he delivered. The last couple of pizzas I was mopping, when she caught my eyes and tilted her head. That same sharp, knowing smile lingering. "Uncle Daryl said it would be okay," she whispered. "I need help." Before I could think, she took my hand and led me toward the basement. I wanted to pull away, to stop, but my body wouldn't respond. It was like my hand wasn't mine. Step by step, she guided me down the stairs. The air grew colder with each step. The kitchen light faded, and shadows stretched around us, thick and suffocating. Then, from the darkness behind us, I heard the faint scrape of boots on the stairs. Daryl had entered. He was quiet, deliberate, and I felt his gaze before I even saw him. The basement seemed to swallow him, and the last bit of light disappeared, leaving only the chill and the oppressive quiet. I remember the smell first, then the sound of the grinder starting somewhere behind me. I woke up in the kitchen just before sunrise, alone, my clothes stiff with something dark and sticky. The basement door was closed. The shop was spotless. Daryl was already at the counter, humming along to the radio, stirring a fresh pot of sauce. "You should go home," he said without looking at me. "You've got another shift tonight." I didn't ask him how long I'd been out, or what happened. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my car. I didn't look back. I'm home now, sitting at my computer, trying to get this down while it still feels real. My clothes are in the trash. My hands still smell wrong no matter how many times I wash them. I have a few hours before I'm supposed to be back at Daryl's. I don't know if writing this will help. I don't know if anyone will believe me. I just know I don't have much time left.